walking that line, when you're well.
Hi again everyone, welcome back to another Allan Holdsworth lesson video. So today we're going to do White Line, which I had mentioned in my last video, and this song is actually very challenging. Physically it's very challenging. It's actually a pretty good example of an earlier Allan tune where the names of the chords aren't really that complicated. They're pretty easy to sort of see where they come from. Even the song structure isn't really too bad. There's a lot of repetition, but playing these voicings physically are really challenging. So you usually see that more in his earlier career, where the chords themselves are really difficult, but naming them or understanding how they're built really isn't that complicated. So I must warn you, this is really challenging, and try not to stretch too much or end up hurting yourself trying to do some of these chords. So you've been warned. So anyway, let's get right to it. White Line.
When you're walking that line, when you're well on your way.
So in this song, Allan actually employs a lot of different techniques while playing his chords. I guess to just sort of give them different phrasing. So not only does he pluck the chords with his fingers, but he actually uses a pick. He uses the whammy bar to sort of dive into chords or raise the bar at the end of a chord. Or sometimes he even uses a volume pedal for certain chords just to ease into them a little bit. I won't be doing all that. I'll just be able to play the chords with the pick and arpeggiate them where he does, or just play with the fingers. But if I can, I'll try to mention where he does all that kind of stuff. So anyway, let's get right to it. The intro of the song, in the very beginning, is sort of like I would think of as the end of the verse. It starts off with this chord, which is kind of interesting. It's an A flat major with an add 11, and it starts off with kind of like a 7 feel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then it goes into the actual chorus where the vocal starts, where Paul Williams starts singing. The two things that are interesting about this chord is, first off, it's very similar to another A flat major with an add 11 chord in White Line, the first chord as well. That part goes like this. So the first chord in Where Is One has the same A flat major with an add 11, but this time we're including that E flat, or the 5th on the bottom. What's very interesting about this chord, it's very unusual for Allan to do, where he's actually playing the same note twice. He's playing 2 A flats here. Usually when Allan plays his chords, every note that he plays is unique. It's not, he doesn't double up on a lot of chords, a lot of notes, I'm sorry, unless it's like, you know, a simple bar chord or something like that. But usually if the chord itself is very strange, every note is unique. So this is a little unusual for him. Of course, he's using the pick here to arpeggiate those chords. Now the next chord, where the vocals start, is also a chord from Where Is One. We played it in an F, but here it's an E flat major 7 sharp 11. And of course, what's really tricky about this chord is the stretch. Understanding it really isn't too bad. We got the E flat major with the sharp 11, and then the major 7 here. But of course, trying to play it, as you can see from my hand, I'm using the side of my hand almost, the side of my fingertips, because there's a very large stretch between the second and third finger. So if you're trying to play straight on, it's going to be much harder. But if you try to play sideways, you can see you can kind of use that. So the first chord of when the vocal starts is an E flat major 7 sharp 11, and then what's happening is you take your 3rd and 4th finger, and they're playing E flat and G, and you actually swap the strings that they're on. So now you're playing a D and a G sharp, but your 1st and 2nd fingers are still in the same place, and you add an F sharp. You're going to bar with your 1st finger, and then you play. So this is a D major with the add sharp 11, your pinky playing the sharp 11. And then for these two chords, I don't like to think of them as two different chords. I like to think of them as a part of a larger chord. So I would consider this an E major E major 9 with a sharp 11. So Allan plays this voicing first. So he's got the G sharp, or the major 3rd on the bass, the B flat with your pinky, which is the sharp 11, the 5 that you're playing with your first finger, the root, and then the G sharp, the major third on top. So he usually arpeggiates this section the same way every time. It's not kind of random. And then after that, you take your finger off the G sharp and you play a low E, and then you just bar the G and the B string with your first finger, like that. And now you're introducing a D sharp there. So that whole section sounds like this. Like that. So I like to think of that whole part as a E major 9 with the sharp 11. This reminds me of something Allan does in another song, 0274, which I haven't done a video on. I also don't know how the song goes off the top of my head, but I know that there's a similar idea in here. Let's say we're playing an A minor add 9 chord, and then instead of playing another E, we're going to use our middle finger to play F, or the flat 13. Then what Allan likes to do sometimes, especially in this song, is that he swaps the octave that the F and the E are in. So he takes the F, and instead of putting it on the B string, it's now going to be on the 8th fret on the A string, and then now you have an E on the B string. So it sounds like this. They're both exactly the same chord. They both contain the same notes, but the F and the E being in different octaves makes the chord sound very different. And that kind of reminds me of what he's doing here, because he's got the root on the B string, and then the root is back on the low E string. So I wonder if he's really thinking of that idea when he's doing 0274, that he got it from White Line. Let me play what we have so far. I just did a lot of talking. Now from here, you have both chords are the same. You have two minor major 7 sharp 11 chords. You have a G minor major 7 sharp 11, and that goes to F. You can also think of the chord as an F sharp major with the G in the bass to an E major with an F in the bass. And then Allan, at this point now, will stop using the pick and start using his fingers. So there's 4 verses in the song. The first verse is different from all the rest because the last 2 chords are different. Verse 2, 3, and 4 are all the same, but the first verse has a slightly different ending than the others. So he goes to his favorite minor 9 voicing, this E flat minor 9. But then he goes to C minor 9. And then what happens here is you sort of move your first finger up a fret and your second, third, and fourth finger down a fret. Then you sort of play this A major with the B in the bass, which I would consider a B9 sus4. So it's like this. And then the verse repeats again. It's all exactly the same. And I think at the end, like I said, Allan will use the bar here. So now this ending, once again, Allan starts with the E flat minor 9, but then instead of going to C, he goes to B flat minor 9, and then he takes that entire chord and moves it back up to C. So his fingers are still playing the same chord, but he's now barring with his first finger for this G sharp or A flat on the top. But what he's doing is instead of using his fingers to play the D, G, and B string here, he's moving them up a string and playing the G, B, and E string. And that really has you're adding that flat 13, so it's like a C minor 9 with a flat 13. I have heard that B flat in there, so I think sometimes Allan will use a pick here to just get a sharper attack, but that B flat is certainly in there. But it's the same chord as before, just now you're barring with your first finger. So let me play that second ending. of dissonant sound. And then it goes into the bridge part. And this bridge part, Allan, in early live versions, will actually start the song with this bridge part while Paul Williams sort of introduces the song. This is where we start adding in those crazy stretches with the add 9 chord. So this is where the difficulty of the song is going to start to ramp up. So anyway, here's the bridge part.
There's a good way to tell if you're there. Take a look at the eyes of the people who share.
So the concept of this bridge part really isn't too bad. They're really a whole bunch of add 9 chords. Really what he's doing is he's using his second, third, and fourth finger on the B, G, and D strings to sort of play this sus2 triad. But what's happening is your first finger is going to be playing different notes, either a minor third or major third, or even sometimes a sharp 11. But your third and fourth finger, and third, fourth, and even second finger are always playing a sus2 triad. So the first chord here is this A sus2, but you're using your first finger to play a C, which is the minor third. So this is, to me, an A minor with an add 9. Then once again, you're taking that sus2 shape and moving into G, but now you're playing a B with your first finger. So now this is a G major add 9. Then this is the first really tough chord of the song. You play an E minor add 9, so you move that sus2 shape to E, but now you have to play a G with your first finger, which I can't do. So I'm going to switch and use my third and fourth finger. So I'm actually barring the D and the G string with my pinky and using my third finger on the B string and then my first finger. Really tricky. Then it goes back to A minor add 9 to G major add 9. You take that minor 9 shape and now you play it on B. So now you have a B minor add 9. This is where the key, the song sort of shifts, because now it goes, instead of A minor add 9, it goes to A major add 9, to G major add 9, to F sharp minor add 9, to G major add 9, I'm sorry, E major add 9. And then what happens is your first finger is still going to hold that G sharp, but now you take that E sus2 and you move it down to D, while you're playing the G sharp, which is a sharp 11, so this is like a D sus2 sharp 11. Then you move that first finger up to A, making it a full D sus2 chord, and then all the way down to F sharp, making it a D major add 9. And then finally, Allan takes that sus2 shape and moves it to B with the open E. So this is like a B sus4, because you have your 1, 4, and your 5. But now, I'm sorry, you have your 5, 1, 4, and then you're using your first finger to play a C sharp, so that would be your 2, so, or the 9. So I would think this is probably called a B sus4 add 9 chord. And then sometimes Allan actually takes his first finger off and plays an open B, which is kind of redundant because you're already playing a B. He just does that, I think, for an arpeggiated effect, but it's there. So that whole sequence sounds like this altogether. And then back to the third verse. As I said, it's just like verse 2. I'm going to use the pick here because I'm going to be lazy. And that's it. Also for that arpeggiated add 9 section, sometimes Allan likes to use the bar. And it made me think, for that section, even when it happens later in the song, I think you might be thinking of it as almost like a pedal steel, kind of emulating a pedal steel, because I heard it not that long ago. And I said to myself, oh, it reminds me of sort of like the pedal steel kind of sound with the arpeggiated chords and using the bar. So anyway, this next section is actually what I would consider the solo section. Even though Allan doesn't play, it's more like a musical interlude here. The chords are the same that what Allan solos over later in the song. So just for ease of it, I'm just going to call it the solo section. And it's got 2 parts. So now let's do the solo section. As I just said, the solo section really has 2 parts to it. The first part is what I call an A-flat pedal section, and then the second part is this add 9 modulated section, which is kind of similar to what the bridge is like. The A-flat pedal section, I call it that because it's almost completely diatonic to A-flat major except the last 2 chords. And he uses tension substitution in that, and if you are not familiar with tension substitution or you did not watch my on merry-go-round lesson, tension substitution is a very simple technique in order to get these really interesting Allan chords. Basically, if you have a 7th chord, a major 7th, a minor 7th, you can replace the 1st, 3rd, and 5th degree with the next note in the scale, 1 note higher or lower. You can even go lower. Not for all of them, like maybe the 7th and the 3rd and the 5th, but the 1st, 3rd, and 5th you can go up to the next degree of the scale. And that's kind of what Allan's doing here. He's playing this sort of major 7 shape, even though he hates this, but he's replacing all the 5ths with 6ths. So he's moving every note that's a 5th up to the 6th here while keeping the other chords or other notes the same. So if we were to play this A-flat major diatonically, we would have A-flat major 7, B-flat minor 7, C minor 7, D-flat major 7, and E dominant 7. E-flat dominant 7, I'm sorry. So those are the only chord that he uses, and then he uses that tension substitution whether he knows it or not. So he's replacing the 5ths with all the 6ths. So instead of an A-flat major 7 here, we take the 5th, which is this E-flat on the B string, and we move it up to F, which is now your 6th, and now you have this chord. Now, this is why when you use tension substitution, you can get all these interesting sounding chords, but naming them could be a little tricky because sometimes they sound one way, but you're thinking of it another way. So here, this is really an F minor triad, and then with your first finger you're playing the 9 on top. So you can think of this chord as an F minor add 9, but if you think of it as a 13th chord, that will make sense diatonically across all the different positions here and all the different degrees of your scale. So just quickly, if we were to do tension substitution for all of these chords, the first chord would be an A-flat major 13, B-flat minor 13, a C minor 7 with a flat 13, I'll talk about this a little bit more later, a D-flat major 13, and then an E-flat dominant 13 chord. So now when Allan's doing this, he doesn't do it in that order. He does the 2nd degree to the 1st, to the 5th, to the 4th, to the 3rd. So this is the actual chords that he's playing in their correct order. So this is the B-flat 13, A-flat major 13, E-flat dominant 13, to D-flat major 13, and then your C minor 7 flat 13. Now, what I wanted to say about this chord that kind of makes it interesting is you can also call this a C minor 7 with the sharp 5, but I want to keep that 13 throughout all the chords so there's some sort of symmetry between all of them and you can sort of see where they're all built from. But once again, this chord also sounds like an A-flat major with a 9, and you can think of it. You can think of all those chords as add 9 chords in a different voicing, but some voicings, but some of them sound different because you'll have like a diminished with the flat 9 and all this weird stuff, but it doesn't sound like it. Once again, it's how you're viewing the chords, and if you think of them as 13th chords like how I do, I think it makes more sense. Anyway, that part repeats twice, and sometimes Allan likes to use the volume pedal here, and he sometimes plays with his fingers. I'm going to just use the pick because I think it actually sounds nicer. So that part repeats twice. So this is where it changes. The last two chords are a little bit different here. Now instead of going to the C minor with the flat 13, Allan plays this chord, which you can think of as two different ways. You can think of this, if you put that B flat on the low E string, as a B flat major 13 chord, but you also have a G minor on the top with a 9 in the bass. So you can think of this as a G minor and 9, which I will because it makes more sense with the next chord that sort of keeps, not the same interval structure, but the root is on the same string. And then we go to this chord, which I think was in my honorable mentions of top 10 hardest Allan chords. You have this E major 7 sharp 11, with the sharp 11 being on the D string with your third finger. This is the same voicing if you watch any of my other videos. Allan likes to use this chord a lot. It's the same voicing, and you can use that like this if you want, but actually it makes it more challenging because if you play it this way, it leads into the next section much easier. I forgot that this song was actually in the book, in the Reaching for the Uncommon Chord, and a lot of the chords are pretty close to being right. If they might not be full with all the notes, they might have 3 out of the 4 notes, but it jumps around on all the different strings because I guess the person playing it or transcribing it didn't think that Allan could, I guess, reach, or whoever, a normal person could reach all these weird chords. So the notes are right, it's just they're moved around, and moving them to the middle strings, the D, the A, D, G, and B strings are much harder because you're kind of using the G and the B string for this sus2 shape, and you just have to stretch really far with your first finger, whereas playing it on those middle strings, you actually have a farther stretch to do with your third. It's something like, I guess, this, which is much harder, and then moving that around. So anyway, the end of that chord, I'll just play the last thing, the last section of that A flat pedal. So now from here we're going to move into the add 9 section, the modulating add 9 section. So you're keeping your third and fourth finger in the same spot, but you're taking that E and moving it up to F, and your first finger from G sharp to G. And now you have this E flat major with the add 9. So this whole thing, this whole next section is really just a lot of modulating with this and pedal point stuff, where you're keeping your first finger in the same spot and you're moving this sus2 shape on different parts of the neck. This is something that Allan likes to do quite frequently in some of his other songs. Like for example, Home has something like this. Did I play that right? I think that might be right. I have to play it in context. Or House of Mirrors. So what he's doing, he's basically just pinning a note on the top as like a pedal point, and then just playing these major triads up and down. And that's what's happening here. Just now he's using a sus2 chord and using his third finger to really modulate into different chords, because that third is going to either be a minor third or a major third, or even the sus4, depending on the position of this sus2. So this is the beginning of that section. We have this E flat major add 9. I have to switch the fingers that I do use for this part, because now what happens is you're pitting that first finger down and you're moving that E flat sus2 to E, and now you have an E minor add 9. Then you move that sus2 shape up to F, but now you're playing a B flat. So this is like an F sus4 add 9. Now from here, this part, those first 2 chords sort of start off the section, but these next 3 chords are really all pinpointed with this B flat, and this gets modulated up. So we have this F9 sus4, I'm sorry, F sus4 add 9. Then we move that F to G, and we're still keeping that B flat there, so now we have a G minor add 9, and then we move that sus2 shape down a half step, and now have a G flat major 9. Then we take those last 3 chords that we just played and modulate it up to really a minor third, and now we're playing an A flat 9 sus4 add 9, then a B flat minor 9, and then a major 9. So that whole section sounds like this. I'll start from here. So that's what that whole section sounds like, and then that whole part gets modulated down a half step from where we start and ends 1 chord early, so it doesn't do the last chord that we just did, modulated down a half step. So now instead of starting on E flat major add 9, we're starting on D major add 9, and this is where the number 3, I think it was the third of Hardest Allan songs, Allan Chords comes in. This is the infamous one that I have in the title card for this video. Whoops. You're just playing an E flat sus2, and then you have the minor third with your first finger. And then once again, it's the same sort of modulation that we just did before. Now you're playing an E sus4 add 9, F sharp minor add 9, F major 9, F major add 9, and then G sus4 add 9, and then A minor add 9. So like I said, it's just what we just did before, just now modulated down a half step. So I'll play that whole sequence. And that's what Allan's soloing over, but really there's those 2 sections. So that section is really just those 2 parts, and that's what Allan's soloing over later. As you can see, the chords themselves are easy to understand, but trying to play them is tough. Now I think for Allan it's really not physically too tough, because his fingers are long enough, but there's not really a lot of stretching involved. You just have to use the side of your hand, and if your first finger is long enough to pin down the note on the E string, you're just moving that sus2 chord shape up and down the neck. Now for the next section is what I would consider the chorus part. This is where Paul Williams starts to actually sing the title of the song, White Line. So if you're at this point, we're basically done, because there's no other really new chords after this. So it starts off with this C sharp major 7 in second inversion. And this is also the same type of chord that you would play here, that you've seen Allan do before. But here he's playing it on the top 4 strings. And then you move that chord at perfect fifth up to G sharp. And now what's interesting is as you move it down, the C sharp and G sharp are staying in the same place, but now you're sort of doing contrary motion with the lower 2 notes. The F goes to F sharp, and the C goes to B. And now you have this chord, what I would consider minor 11. Now what's interesting is you can think of this chord in a couple of different ways. You can think of this chord as an F sharp sus4 with the 9 on the top. You can think of this chord as a B sus2 with the 6. You can even think of it as a C sharp dominant 7 with the sus4 on the bottom. But I'm going to call it a G minor 11. G sharp minor 11. If we took this G sharp and we move it down to the low E string, we have this chord, which is a little bit more common. And I'm just going to call it that because it's actually easier for me to remember and name. Also, what's interesting is the bass is doing some really interesting playing over this, making the chord sound a little bit different every time I'm playing a different bass note. So the bass part here is really interesting. But this is what Allan's doing. It's actually relatively simple. So it's a G sharp minor 11, and then it goes to D sharp minor 11. Repeats again the same way, but now the first chord is arpeggiated. And And then from there is where the solo section starts. And this is kind of what's interesting with some Allan stuff. I've realized in some of his songs when he starts improvising, if the solo section has two parts, an A and a B section, Allan doesn't start soloing until the B section. He'll just play the chords of the A section and then start the solo on the B section. Not sure why. I guess it's just something that he just likes to do. So the solo section has the same chords as before. He starts physically playing the A flat pedal section. And then this is where he starts actually doing the soloing. So I'll just play through the, whoops. And then once he comes out of the solo, goes right back to the chorus section. Allan just plays this part twice instrumentally. And then Paul Williams starts singing. Here's the only thing that's different. The last time the chorus is played, the last chord, he doesn't move to D sharp minor 11, he moves up an octave to G sharp minor 11. And then starts the last verse, verse 4. Which is just like verse 2 and 2, 3, and 4. And that's usually where the song ends when he played it live, especially when he was playing with the keyboard player. But on earlier live versions and on the record, there's a little tag at the end. It's just the first few chords of the solo section, where the add 9 sort of modulating section. But the chords are really fast. This part's really tough. Very quickly, even though we just did it before, it's an E flat major 9 to E minor 9, F9, sus4 add 9, G minor 9, F sharp 9, A flat 9 sus4, A flat, keep on calling 9 sus4, A flat sus4 add 9, and then B flat minor add 9. I'll try to do it. I can't do it up to speed, but I'll just play it slowly. Yeah, that's it. I'll try one more time because I don't think I played it that great. Yeah, it's really, really, really difficult. As you can see, I'm struggling with it because I really can't play the song. But I can teach you because I know how the chords go. So I know someone out there would be able to play this and knock it out of the park. But I can't do it. I don't have the hands for it. So yeah, that's White Line. A relatively simple to understand tune as some of the other stuff that we've done, but physically really, really, really challenging. So if you're going to try to do these, I just really stress not to try to hurt yourself trying to reach some of these chords, because if your fingers are not long enough, you're just going to have a really, really difficult time playing them. But that's it. Thanks for joining me again, and I guess I'll see you guys pretty soon.